So we'll get started. I just want to introduce Michal Rosen-Zvi, who is the director for AI for drug discovery at IBM Research, and she's one of the co-organizers of the event today. And then Michal will introduce the panelists.
Thank you very much.
Jim says to go in order, so I think we nailed it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to moderate the panel about new generative AI approaches for drug discovery and need for open innovation. So we had this fascinating panel just before we break out for lunch. And we talked about gaps and needs. And now we are looking into the future and what can be done and what is being done today. And I'm happy that I have today these 4 amazing panelists to share with us their views. I'll start with, I'll do a very quick introduction, and then I'll ask you guys to talk about your activities in the context of this panel. So I'll start with Professor Feixiong Cheng, a wonderful collaborator from first-hand experience, and a professor at Cleveland Clinic University. Everybody is wonderful, but I just was blessed to collaborate with Professor Feixiong Cheng. And also we have here Professor Jim Collins, who is from Department of Biology Engineering at MIT and the Broad Institute in Harvard. And Dr. Vlad Ivanov, Director Group Lead at Pfizer. And we are very blessed to have Kaitlin McCardle, okay, I made it, Senior Editor at Nature Computational Science. So thank you all for joining us. And my first ask from each one of you, and we will make it in order, but later we'll try to create chaos so we keep it more interesting. But the first question is, can you please describe your role and the specific areas of generative AI for drug discovery that your teams are most engaged with?
Thank you, Michal, for this kind of wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Feixiong Cheng. I'm the new director for Cleveland Clinical Genome Center. So my lab is focused on developing and applying AI ML approach for both target identification and drug discovery, in particular focus on Alzheimer's disease. We discussed in this morning as well. For example, our lab is one of a founding lab by National Institute on Aging. They call NIA, one of founding AI ML consortium member as well. So our goal is really apply AI methodology, in particular generative AI approach, to integrate larger scale whole genome sequence data generated by NIH with the multi-omics data for target identification and drug development, include both drug repositioning study and also de novo molecule design as well.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Collins. I'm a professor at MIT, but notably, I'm really happy to be back here at BU. I was on faculty here for almost a quarter century. And my work relevant to generative AI falls into 2 areas. One is I'm actually directing the Antibiotics AI project at MIT and Harvard. And as part of this project, we're using AI both for discovery and increasingly now for design of coming up with new antibiotics to address the looming antibiotic resistance crisis. And secondly, I do a fair amount of work in synthetic biology. So this idea that one can engineer gene circuits, molecular components, pathways, and use these to re-engineer, reprogram living cells and cell-free systems, endowing them with novel functions. And we've been using generative AI both in the RNA space to come up with new regulatory components for RNA therapeutics and RNA biotechnology, as well as now increasingly using generative AI for gene circuit design.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vlad Ivanov. I'm from Pfizer, and I'm in the group which is called AI, ML, Quantitative and Digital Sciences. There were many great talks today and discussions about early stage, compound design, etc. If you imagine the drug development, its kind of trajectory, and I'm sitting on the later stages of this trajectory when we are starting human trials, clinical trials. And there are plenty of needs for AI ML technologies at this space to make sure that the trial not fail, or if we know that it's going to fail, that how to mitigate this. And specifically generative models we use to address many questions. Some of them are operational nature, and I'm not going to be discussing them. I just mentioned that like there are many documents which generative AI helps to generate. By definition, it's designed for. But also we are thinking and working a lot on indication expansion. And this is broader than just drug repurposing, because we also thinking about how to do the drugs in sequence or else also in combinations. And we use a lot of LLM models to derive the knowledge, build giant knowledge graphs which can be used for the future interrogation and modeling. So this is the most relevant topic to the meeting today, which I will stick to.
Thank you.
I'm Katie McCardle. I'm a senior editor at Nature Computational Science. I know that the publishing process can be a bit opaque at times, so hopefully today I can provide a bit more of an editorial perspective. So I'm a computational chemist by training. My background is in catalysis, and so I handle the large majority of chemistry submissions that we get. As you may or may not know, we're a very broad computational science journal, so we kind of cover all things computational, regardless of the application or methodology. And so many of the submissions that we get using generative AI in this space are related to particularly small molecule generation, searching chemical space, which we know is kind of infinitely large and expansive, protein design, and some of the kind of like posing that you mentioned as well.
Thank you very much. And if it's okay, Kaitlin, I'll start with you now, because we have the next question, which are which aspects of generative AI development and creativity in drug discovery do you believe would benefit the most from open innovation? And because you are an editor, if I might ask as well, how persistent are you on requiring that the publications would be on technology that is open?
Well, I'm really glad you asked me so that it sounds like less of a pitch when I bring it up. So we are extremely strict. First, I'll talk about the kind of open innovation part of it. For every paper that we publish, every primary research paper, we mandate that the code and the data is placed into a DOI minting repository so that the GitHub isn't made private later, either accidentally or intentionally. We also enforce a code peer review process. So we ask our peer reviewers to comment on the code. You're welcome to involve a postdoc or a grad student to help with that. And then we also, at times, will check the code ourselves to make sure that it's functioning. We've all had the experience of going to someone's GitHub and we can't actually use the code, or the data's not there, or it's very complicated to get to, and that's kind of what we want to avoid. So for us, I would say that open science, open code, and data is one of our top priorities, because we want to ensure that the tools that we're developing and the data that we're producing or using is also accessible to the field. We talked a lot about data today and in the previous panel specifically, and I also really strongly agree that I think data availability, and particularly negative data, is one of the most important challenges in the field. I would also say that I think that one area that can kind of benefit is that I feel very strongly that we need to think about the use of generative AI, particularly in this space, kind of holistically. So we know that generative models are particularly resource intensive and can have some harmful environmental impacts, and they use tons of water and can contribute to electronics waste. And that's not me saying we shouldn't use them, but I think that we need to be very careful about the way that we do use them so that we're not exasperating health outcomes for some while trying to address outcomes in a particular therapeutic space.
Thank you. And just for the aspect of where we are heading, what the trends that you see on generative AI in particular?
So where we're heading, I think that this question that we saw in one of the talks this morning about is bigger better, I think that that's one that's kind of coming up more and more in conversation, where we're starting to ask, is this something that we need to be doing? and we also saw a lot of discussion related to responsible AI. And I think that that's something particularly related to generative AI that is coming to the forefront of every conversation, because we need to make sure that we're using tools like this that are extremely powerful and advantageous for us in ways that are equitable.
Thank you. Thank you. This is very concrete, helpful comments also in general when we come and publish to address these very important points. Who wants to come next? Yeah, Vlad, yeah.
Next, Kaitlin, great points, and like it's really great kind of big picture of what the challenge is. From our group where we are sitting, I like to kind of make several points. We see the great need, and it's still not there for generated data, for synthetic data, because we often cannot explore great technologies. This, for example, our vendors and sharing constraints for personal data are still here. And they will be for a long time, I believe, because there are many rules in place to help the privacy and so on. But I think generated data will open the new venue to collaborate with, across the industry. And in process to generate data, it's not just one Pfizer or like Novartis or any other company can do it. It should be across the industry and academia to understand the process, how it is done, to validate this, and make sure that what we're generating is really represent the features and multimodal distributions of real data. Another aspect, like I'm talking about data, but generally what I mean, the multimodal data. There are different, everyone recognizes now the value for multimodal data, like from imaging to molecular data and healthcare data. And we need to be able to go across all these domains in generation, and open innovation is very important here.
Thank you. So you put emphasis on the importance of multimodality when analyzing data and the
synthetic data.
And the gaps of not having access to real data, so benefiting from synthetic data that can be generated with generative AI. That's the way you say it?
It's generated this generative AI and also validated by the community that the methodology sound as well as we are reproducing the data which we are using to generate it.
So can I ask Jim and Feixiong, both of you, like, how much emphasis do you put on generating data with your technologies of generative AI and benefiting from patients' data, like looking at the multimodality and complementing the analysis with other modalities where data is lacking? Are you leveraging this type of approach?
Yeah. I think this is a great question. I can show one example. I think also mentioned by this morning speaker as well about the single-cell foundation model. For example, we study Alzheimer's disease. It's a highly heterogeneous disease. Our goal is we want to build this kind of generative AI model, not just in one type of population, not just focus on European ancestry. We really want to focus on data. We can come out across multiple diversity, including Latinos, African Americans. So one ongoing project we did right now is we built a larger scale single-cell foundation model. We built from really diversity data from more than 2,000 patient single-cell data we can leverage from the different cohort. The beauty for generative AI is they really can help us to reduce the bench effect or data noise or errors when we bring this data from different cohorts. This is the bigger question we discussed this morning. And why we love the generative AI for this kind of approach is we really ask ourselves is the traditional approach, people or biological just come out of biological hypothesis and then we use the data to do this kind of data-driven hypothesis generation. This is what we did in the past few decades. The generative AI in our lab is, we really want to think about is, could we really generate some even new ideas or no therapeutic hypotheses from this big data we can leverage. So this is something really inspired by a talk listening really leading AI expertise. They talk about how we can use the AI to do some project from 0 to 1, not just really focus on project people have did today for 1 to 10 or even 1 to 100. I think this is why we love the generative AI approach. We try to apply this kind of technology for Alzheimer's therapeutic discovery as a big challenge for drug discovery field.
Thank you.
So in our group, we've been using generative AI to design new molecules. We're not using it to generate synthetic data sets, but I'll speak to the data and the data needs of these platforms that we've heard already multiple times in this conference, but we critically need more data. And we need open data for drug discovery. I think that it's interesting. We're not really yet in the big data phase outside of sequencing in drug discovery. I think we saw a very big data set around protein structures and the protein structure database that actually helped lead to AlphaFold and Rosetta Fold. But for our drug discovery, we don't have them. Siloed data sets within pharma and biotech, very small sets within academia. We're attempting to generate our own data sets. We've done it now across 7 different bacterial pathogens, looking at phenotypic data for a training set of 40,000 compounds and now 3 human clinical tox screens. But we need critically data on solubility, bioavailability, metabolic liability, additional tox data. We're doing great right now at using AI for both discovery and design of coming up with antibiotics that do a great job of killing pathogens in a dish in our lab, but not very good at killing them in a mouse. And interesting in my world that if you do kill it in a mouse, you have about a 90% chance of being successful in a human, so a great success rate. But we don't have those data to train the models yet. And if we did, then I think we'll see big success.
Thank you very much. So you listed now the type of data sets that are still missing, and I heard this morning that toxicity and pharmacodynamics are type of data that is missing, and you added to that solubility and other properties that are not directly within this list. Is there like another big group of types of data sets that you would like to categorize? What else is missing beyond these categories we just listed?
You know, I think an additional one, which is distinct, but it was referred to at the end of the last panel, is that I do think we need much better data on drug target engagement. Okay. That when you look at molecular docking simulations, they're really quite poor. That you can use incredibly detailed ones, but they'll give you an answer for one molecule against one target in about 4 weeks. Just run the experiment. You don't need to do that simulation. In order to harness the large-scale, ultra-large-scale virtual screening that I think AI will make available and enable, we need much better data on docking. And so we need to do higher throughput schemes to get after this. I think that's a completely different type of class of data, yes, but one in which we don't have.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. And one more thing that came up from your discussion is that we don't have enough lab tests, and we also might not have enough open data from animal studies. And the question is whether we can skip the animal studies with the generative AI. Are we heading the direction? That's a question I want you to answer.
It's an interesting question. Maybe I'll just speak to that first. You know, I don't think we're anywhere close to skipping the animal studies. I think there is a lot of talk about digital twins and can we do simulations. I think getting after a molecular simulation or biological simulation is probably never really going to get you there because there's too many variables, too many undefined parameters. Data-driven models, I think, will be useful. I do think getting after additional data, you're going to have to kill a lot of mice to get after meaningful ML models, well beyond water needs. So I think we're far from that. But I think we can get after better models to make it more likely that you're going to have success, both from a tox standpoint and a biological efficacy standpoint. But even there, we're really far from that.
Thank you.
So for your question, I think there may be 2 types of approach. It can help us think about the possibility how we can scale animal study. One is the large scale real world data may really help us to learn from the existing FDA-approved drug or existing safety data from this real world data to help us to build some like a transfer learning for new molecule we generate. Maybe we can predict safety without animal data. I think FDA also consider this possibility as well, just discussed. The second idea is, I think the new human model, like for example, our lab use the patient-derived, for example, iPSC-derived cellular model, organoid model, or chip model. This model maybe in the future can help us to at least reduce the animal study, just even also reduce the timeline for drug discovery as well. Hopefully, we can see in the next few years as well.
Thank you. More comment on that? Okay, so now I'm going to ask you a really hard question. I hope it's fine. And that is, when you look at the generative AI promise, what would be the most exciting example of yourself or others that you looked at, where it really made the leap that we want it to be, or it's a first example of such leaps? What would be that example within a specific condition? We mentioned Alzheimer, there are many other conditions, antibiotics and so on. What is the example where you think the generative AI is showing giving us very first indication that it's going to change the future for us.
Maybe I can go first. I think Dr. James Collin have many these kind of examples, but I really want to share one example I learned. For example, one company they call In Silico Medicine is a company from Hong Kong, right? So they really show good example how they can use the generative AI to design molecule, and then they can synthesize molecule, and then can do biopsy in animal cell, and then they move to the clinical trial. So entire, pipeline for this, example they just published, I think a few months ago this year in Nature Biotechnology is the total the drug discovery pipeline from the beginning to the clinical trial is about 2 years or 2.2 months. So, I think this is really exciting, exciting field how the generative AI can help us the drug discovery pipeline from the periods like decades. Now they can reduce just a couple years. I think this is the significant example. But the challenge is how, even for our like academic lab, how we can build this kind of ecosystem. Now we can use the generative chemistry to design molecule, and then we can replicate to synthesize and test and move clinical. This is still a big challenge or bottleneck. We have to figure out. This is why today we sit here together. We need also a pharma to help to work on together as well. Really focus on some very important health crisis problem like Alzheimer's or pandemic. Really apply this generative AI for rapidly therapeutic discovery. Hopefully we can see more examples in the near future as well.
Just before, thank you very much. This was fascinating. Just before we move to here, I mean, everybody, I would like to share your view, but before we move on, you said about the importance of partnerships to bring this to the academic environment and to make an ecosystem that enables such acceleration. What pieces needs to be open? What your point of view on where we need to open technology so that we can make this ecosystem successful?
Yeah. I think this is really good question. So, for example, in Cleveland Clinic, in our Genome Center, or even in our department, we have different interaction with the industry, try to build the partnership as well. I think the challenging, have open innovation with the pharma, with the industry, or other, agency is the trust. How we really can trust each other, and how we can build this kind of and make this happen rapidly. I think this is a really hard question, and we try to learn by ourselves as well. I think the most important I would say, or just based on our personal experience, is really open. Open to accept the different opinions, different ideas, and try and test, and then you will get a good experience to make this. I think something we have to find a small project to work on that.
Sounds great. And we do have these breaking out sessions that you are all invited, and a reminder to put your name under a session out of the 4 that are listed there. One of them is challenges and benchmarks. So there's challenges to the community is one, benchmarks is another. And in both of them, it's a mechanism to create trust, right? It will enable building trust. So we would like to hear from all of you. And soon I'll finish and also let you ask questions. But I still have this burning question. Jim, do you want to go next of what would be a good example of generative AI that changes the drug discovery, an example that exists today that you were very impressed with?
I'll maybe quickly touch on 3 to speak to a general theme. So the 3 in order of difficulty of synthesis are RNA, protein, and small molecule. So in the RNA space, there's very little that's been done so far in generative AI. So I think it's a space that's probably about to very quickly explode because of very large training sets that are available, at least from sequence standpoint, and functional annotation, but not function. And second, so easy to synthesize. You can, in 2-3 days, have a construct in your lab that you could test functionally. Tim Liu, former colleague of mine at MIT, actually has one of the few pieces on generative AI for RNA where he showed you could synthesize functional 5' UTRs with enhanced functionality. In the protein space, of course, David Baker at University of Washington is the leader in using generative AI, particularly RF diffusion. And you can open up any recent issue of Nature Science or Cell, and you'll find one of David's papers. And it's interesting of that state, easier to synthesize than small molecule, but not as easy as RNA. I think the field is still at the space where they've gotten quite good at designing proteins with specific structures in mind, shapes, not yet function. So you'll mainly find very pretty looking proteins, but not yet functional ones or ones with desired function. So there's work to be done there from a therapeutic standpoint. And then third, in small molecule, I'll just share, we've been working quite hard to do generative AI for antibiotics. And interestingly, have in silico come up with what we think are hundreds, if not thousands, of interesting possibilities. And from our first round, we're only able to synthesize 6 of those interesting compounds. But 5 of those 6 turned out to be potent new antibiotics.
Wow.
So the power of it, I think, is available, but not yet attainable because of synthesis challenges, both on whether it can be synthesized or not, and if it can you do it cheap enough and quick enough to matter?
Fascinating. Congratulations on 5 out of 6. Wow.
I will talk about this from like where I am from clinical trial perspective. I'm a big fan of large language models, and the large language models are really transforming the industry as we speak. They also bring in new challenges it's not like magic bullet, but what we see right now is that the evidence extraction, these large language models, is getting really at light speed right now. Indeed, like as I said, like challenges exist, but what we are able to do in like several months now is much quicker. And another advantage of large language models is that we kind of capture this multimodality in natural way. There are, and you can kind of bias toward the content which you'd like to expect from this extraction. And it's important, again, like we are from at very early stages now, as this large language model landscape is very changeable. It's changed every time, every day, but the value is already clear. Just the next step will come how to harness these models and how to put some constraint and evaluation framework on this, because right now it's all just great, very exciting, but we'll need rigorous numbers to quantify how well and how much it is helping now.
Interesting, yeah. Thank you.
So, I mean, going last in this question is a bit tough. I was planning to mention some of David Baker's work that Jim already touched on, because I do think that the RF diffusion and protein work has been really transformative. The other thing, which you also kind of touched on, is the use of language models, I think has been particularly useful for improved explainability. You know, obviously, for those working in the field, there is a level of expertise, and sometimes the usefulness of such a tool is brought into question. But I think that for enabling a reduced barrier of entry, it's really important. So I would say that kind of this improved level of explainability with generative models has been really, really useful.
Thank you. So we heard that the language models can help explainability and multimodality stitching, I will call it, connecting the different modalities. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your answers. I have more questions, but I want to make sure we have chance for the audience to ask. So let me open it for you guys. Whoever has any question, please, there's a microphone there, right? Just raise your hand. Yeah.
So thank you for your comments. You talked about the openness of the data and the openness of the models. An important component of developing AI models is also the infrastructure, so the cloud system infrastructure. And I think we increasingly see a difference in terms of the resources that industry has and academia has, particularly now that this infrastructure is extremely expensive in terms of the cost of the GPUs and so on. So can you comment on what may be some of the solutions to close that gap and to make that infrastructure more openly available for people in academia or in less well-resourced places compared to industry to contribute to this field?
I can try to comment on first. So I have exactly the similar question I want to ask Sean in this morning, keynote talk as well. We have exactly the same problem. For example, we are just academic lab. we don't have a capacity like OpenAI. We can build this kind of generative or pre-training model in billions per meter. We don't have this capacity. We only can maximum just millions or even hundreds of millions per meter. This is maximal. And the question is that today for our project, for example, Alzheimer's project, our data come from like a Google Cloud, come from AWS Cloud or Microsoft Cloud. And we talk about data fusion, data integration to bring this data. Even we just download data, it's still we need to pay money as well. So I think this is the big challenging why today we have open, innovation, ideas how, we can discuss the possibilities we can work on together, to figure out this problem. But one idea I really enjoy that I can share during the pandemic is, during the pandemic, one group from New York, they really proposed the idea is they can do molecular docking, just use your own computer or even your own desktop if you can share. So people can run this kind of, computing, large scale computing docking in, 10,000, computers across different lab, right? They can share the results. This is more response for pandemic, but I don't think this idea can apply for all projects we have. I think there's something we hopefully really open innovation, we can come out of some ideas how we can share this kind of results, or even NIH can provide more centralized cloud computing, for our academic research or even for industry for help us to accelerate the generative AI drug discovery, process.
I do not have answer, but I have another complexity to your question. As of right now, hardware landscape is changing because Tesla, for example, and then other parties involved in generative models, Facebook, they are developing their sort of GPUs-like platforms. And what we'll get in like few years from now will be not dominated by NVIDIA architecture. So this will add another complexity to our future models. I assume that will be different, like where we run them and how we run them. So I think right now it's kind of another things to keep in mind. And as I said, sorry, but I'm adding another complexity to this.
I think that we do have some people here in the room who can help with this complexity, because there's this OpenShift, which is platform-independent environment that is developed by the open community. And that's supposed to address that. I mean, it will require more work from the community, but this is an ongoing way to resolve the question of the many platforms which are challenging. I agree. Anyone here wants to make any comment on that? Okay, Jim, you were about to answer.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment on Giannis's. I think universities need to catch up better than we are. I don't think we can directly compete with the massive tech companies, but I think we've been surprised in the last 10 years of the compute needs. And I think for those outside of academia, you'd be surprised to see how poor our compute capabilities are, even a place like MIT. It's not on par with where the needs are. And so universities have to either invest in the infrastructure, buy up a bunch of NVIDIA GPUs, CPUs, and or provide resources that allow faculty and the students to access those. That we are behind, we can't compete with a 1,000-person research team at a top tech, but we can do a lot better than we are. And my group, for example, scrambles right now to try to get access to the supercloud at MIT. And even there, it's insufficient for many of the types of models we'd like to run.
So this leads to another question about public-private partnerships that can be done. And the question I want to ask you, if there's a role of open innovation in such partnerships. So do you think that being able to offer open code and open models means that you can better partner with the private entities, the enterprises who own some of these resources of compute? Or is that not helping? It's not part of the equation. What do you see in these efforts to create more opportunities to get access to compute?
So I would say that it absolutely would improve the ability to collaborate. I was at a conference a year or two ago, and someone approached me and said, "Oh, I work in material science, and I recently used a method that was published in your journal for climate prediction in this problem that I have. And I thought, like, someone's paying you to say that, right? Like that's the kind of thing that we hope for, to see someone use tools that are available across different applications. But I think that that's an example that shows that if it's out there, people will try it, right? If we build it, they will come. Kind of mentality, I think, is important, because if there's no access, then that door is completely closed. So I think it takes both parties, obviously. We need academia to kind of push for more investment, but also we need industry to kind of open the door a bit more, make available some of the proprietary data. You know, we know that there's tons of power in data and tons of money in data and in models, but we all have a common goal, and kind of remembering that, maybe naively, but I think remembering that common goal is what can help to kind of foster some of those partnerships.
And that's very good to hear from you, because I think the editors and the high-impact journals are providing strong incentives for the academia and the industry to make such collaborations and to make that happen. So it's very good to hear that. Before we close, I don't know if we have time for one more question.
Thank you. My name is Wen Lu. I'm a faculty from BU Medical Campus and also Boston Medical Center. So I have a question. So as in academia as well as in industry, so as a scientist or physician scientist, we publish paper all the time. So, and there's over 1 million, article in PubMed every year. And also there's more than 5,000 clinical trials in clinicaltrial.gov every year. So can these data in public domain can be used and as an open innovation and train AI algorithm and for drug discovery?
Thank you very much for the question. We have a taker.
I tried to, I think it's possible. One good example is the ChatGPT, right? So ChatGPT really can integrate the billions of abstracts that we published in the past decade, right? Now it's a help for all, not just academic field, for business or everything in the field. I think for drug discovery, you mentioned the clinical trial data or something. One project we collaborated with the Northwestern as well is we try to predict, use the science of science, field, means that how predict why this drug get a success or other drug not get a success by integrate, 10,000 clinical trial data they released in the clinicaltrial.government website to build this kind of pre-training model, even language model we can predict. So this kind of language model, when we build, we can share to the industry. If you have a similar pipeline or disease area, you can use this tool to help you to test some question. For example, even can help the pharma to choose the best clinical trial or pipeline drug or target they want to test. I think it's possible, but we need more work to be done. I think, in particularly for large language model, can help this field, very well.
I just wanted to add that there is an initiative from Stanford, I believe, which is called SNAP, to basically build the big knowledge graphs using all possible databases and data sources. And I believe Marinka Zhitnik is doing something similar for drug repurposing to kind of use language models from different sources and then build the deep learning models.
Thank you.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So, for this published data in PubMed, so we know there are many data is cannot be reproduced. So the reproducibility, the rigor of the science, and also NIH also very focus on this when we submit grant. So how these reproducibility, the data in public domain, if train the AI algorithm, will that affect the outcome?
I'll maybe just touch brief. So I don't know that it's the reproducibility of the data, it's the reproducibility of the results, meaning what finding was being highlighted by the team as being significant from the data set. You know, my concern on the data are, were they collected in a rigorous manner, consistent way, and thus, you know, your first question would worry me of the ability to curate a data set that I would be confident in across so many different platforms, so many different labs. But the question on reproducibility, I think it's actually an important thing for training our trainees to understand what really is a reproducible result, meaning it's not going in and finding it and then coming back 20 times and then finding it again. It's finding it 18 out of those 20 times. And I think that that's more reflective of what's happening. And it's possible down the line, it's still very early, that AI-type tools will be helpful for uncovering from those results what's happening. Of course, it's become quite popular to use AI to look at image reproduction, that you have images that are being reproduced and presented as different images when they're the same, which I think is valuable for keeping people honest. But I think the reproducibility is different from data versus results.
And let me just add to that, the way I see the trend in the usage of tech. So you see that there was tech to help cars to automatically navigate. And in many ways, it helps drivers to be safer, because then you have all of these alerts jumping up and telling you, hey, I don't think you should go that fast or cross the lane without signaling and so on. I think that similarly in the drug discovery ecosystem and industry, there will be many, many tools that will help the trainees to be more careful about reproducibility, because we can say, hey, this is an abnormal result. We didn't expect this small molecule to connect to the target based on the analysis. Recheck, maybe you missed something. So I think as the whole world in this drug discovery mature, the trainees will not have to get a specific special explanation. They will just get it from the tag that will make it automatic. Sorry, that was my point of view, but I see Diana has a question and I want to hear that.
This is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, but you know, in terms of how can we model industry academic partnerships and make it a win-win for both sides, such that cloud computing resources are made less expensive for academics to do some of this really innovative work. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
So we, you know, couple weeks ago, like October 15, 17, we just have 3 days workshop at DC NH campus to discuss the cloud-based computing for AI ML consortium. So the final conclusion is we still try to use the hybrid approach. For example, at our Cleveland Clinical, for my lab, I more use the standalone, you know, server for our approach, like James Collins mentioned, is because this invested by our university, like a Cleveland Clinical, is much cheaper or even free for me as well. And the cloud right now, even AWS good cloud, is so expensive. Not computing. If I put, you know, hundreds of terabytes data and they charge me every day and every week, it's very expensive. Based on the funding, you know, availability we have, I think this is something we really need a more centralized results, or even in the university level, in the, you know, state level, or even in the national level, to help us to address high needs for the, you know, the computing, even in particular GPU for generative AI field, you know.
So yeah, interesting question, Diane. So when I think of the cloud computing resources that I like to access, pharma doesn't come to mind, but big tech companies do. And I've interacted with all the big tech companies, and they're not interested in our models. They have their own models that they love. They're interested in our data, and they're interested in our ability to test their models experimentally. And so I think there are ways to leverage that further, of giving them, you know, in collaboration and access to our ability to generate text questions. Maybe they don't care for our models, but we could maybe get better access to their cloud computing capabilities to develop our models so our trainees can learn how to do it, to then join their companies. But I think there's ways we could do it better than we are right now.
Thank you. Yes.
So another question, you know, if you think about the AI models that have been developed, each one of these very successful models had behind a huge data set. If you think about the LLMs, the computer vision models, even AlphaFold, there's Protein Data Bank. And some of you talked about the really big jump from computational data to animal trials, and even then to human trials. So do you think that we will get there in the sense of having large enough data sets to train models that may predict how a specific compound is going to interact with a very unique cancer cell line, or a drug with a disease in a body that there are so many other factors that are sort of there and taking place at the right at that time? So are we over-relying on AI is one question, and the other question is, if you think that AI could be helpful in that domain, are we even collecting that type of data that would enable models to help us jump from the computational modeling to sort of more digital twinning or sort of realistic models on how a drug will react in a certain organism?
I think that's a really great question. I can show my personal experience, just use the Alzheimer's disease example. I was trained in Boston, graduated here in Julius Castle lab about 7-8 years ago before I moved to the Cleveland Clinical. During this time, if you study Alzheimer's disease, you have you have less chance to find any data you need, like a genetic data, multi-omics data. It's little, right? But right now, like 7-8 years later, you can see for Alzheimer's field, they have really, really high reached data, generated in particular by NIH supported, grant. Right now for our lab, if anyone trainings, postdoc, or fellows, if they have the idea, they can easily find the data and build the model from the data to test this hypothesis. They even don't need to generate new data to test, or validate this AI model. I think this field is significant growth in the past few years. Alzheimer's, I don't think is a good example, but the cancer, like NCI, is a really good example. You mentioned the cancer cell line. For cancer field, 10 years ago, I was trained in cancer system biology in Dana-Farber Marco Waddell lab. This time, you can find any cancer data you need. And 10 years later, they have more rich data we have right now. But the problem comes to the Jim comments as well. How we really find the high quality data, whether well established or benchmark endpoint. This is a problem. Today we have many, many data, but someone say, oh, this data is not really helpful for me, right? Because people argue the data reproducibility issue or other issue as well. For example, for Alzheimer's field, we get the brain tissue data when people die, and we identify target, and then we do the drug design using the active approach. However, when we do clinical trial, we only test this molecule drug in the earlier Alzheimer's. We never tested the in later Alzheimer's patient. This kind of big gap about the data is really make our drug discovery for Alzheimer's, this kind of disease, is really challenging. It means the data we get from the ending of the disease, but we tested the clinical trial the early of the disease. This is just one example I want to share with you about the data.
Just another aspect to this. In large language model, for example, the paradigm is shifting from training to inference. And this is, I think, aligned what you asked, because now there's new models, new ChatGPT, it's not 5, it's or whatever they, M0, whatever they call it. It's the paradigm is shifting to inference to understand why this answer was given and how was answer is given. So it's encouraging because it gives us, at least I was very excited to see this shift. Hopefully this will focus more on how the results are obtained rather than just like training on enormous data sets.
So honestly, I don't think we're over-relying on the models just yet. I think they're still viewed as tools, and really early tools, with significant limitations. Again, at the previous panel, I thought there was a really excellent point raised about uncertainty. We need to do a better job of appreciating where should we be confident and not confident. Then to the data, I think within our space of drug discovery and broadly biotech, I think we need concerted national and international efforts to create the next data sets along lines that we did for sequencing, along lines that was done for protein structure database. And notably, Mike Curris, who was a PhD student of mine here at BU 15 years ago, is now the director of DARPA's biodivision. And Mike has a vision to create data factories with support from DARPA to do this very thing. Now, the challenge there will be how to incentivize academics. You don't want to be a grunt just generating data. You want to somehow also get after interesting science questions, but I think it could be transformative if Mike could pull this off.
Yeah, not much more to add. I think everyone has made excellent points. I would say it really is going to come down to trustworthiness of the models, whether we can kind of take that leap or not. I don't believe that we're kind of over-relying on it yet, but I'm sure that that argument will be made in the future as we start to, potentially move away from animal models and start relying on AI more.
Thank you. We had a lot of discussion on barriers and opportunities. If okay with you, to finish this round of panel discussion, can each one of you say what is the biggest barrier in your view and the most promising opportunity? Like just summarizing, you raised a lot of very interesting points, but when you think about everything discussed today, what's the biggest barrier to get forward with generative AI, and what's the most promising opportunity?
So I would say, in my point of view, the biggest barrier, again, not to kind of belabor the point, but I think that data is really what it comes down to. Making data available, particularly negative data, and I would say that that's one of the biggest barriers. There's also a lot of challenges in fostering meaningful collaborations, especially across industry and academia, or even experimental and computational. We often don't speak the same languages. We don't maybe have the same goals. So I think that that's kind of one of the biggest challenges as well. In terms of opportunities, we published a perspective by Daniel Recker at Duke earlier this year, where he looked into drug discovery and development companies, pharmaceutical companies, and kind of characterized which ones have dedicated in-house computational pipelines as part of their discovery process. And the study showed that those that have that kind of integrated computational pipeline exhibit growth that is kind of uncharacteristic to even the biotech realm. So we know that computational tools can be beneficial economically and can really accelerate the discovery process as well. So I think there's huge opportunity for growth there in terms of better integrating computational tools into the discovery loop.
Thank you very much.
Just to add what you said, putting the benchmark on different computational platforms and on different computational models, it's very important because, to the question of credibility of the models, how this model stands with respect to other models, as well as how can we future, which platform is best in the specific area of biology and coupled with machine learning. I think that kind of requires a lot of collaborations between academia and industry. Industry has a need for this. Academia has a understanding how to do this and how to come up with this benchmark. Industry will never have time to come up with a benchmark. However, industry can help with the recommendations as well as kind of share the vision how industry will be looking at this. I think this is important, to consider.
So these are the barriers, and what's the biggest opportunity?
The biggest opportunity, this is very highly variant and growing domain, and I think that is similar to, I like this example. There's a global warming 10 years ago. We knew that it is happening. We didn't know what to address. So we know approximately the same thing. There's a machine learning and AI in drug discovery and drug development.
Better than global warming, right? It's not.
Well, it's in positive sense, but we are now kind of in the next few years, we will need to understand the opportunities and what generative AI brings to the industry. Because now we're still very uncertain, in which problems, which models works better, and I think it's an exciting thing.
Thank you.
So I think the biggest barrier we have for generative AI and drug discovery is around chemical synthesis, or experimental libraries for screening of order 10 to the 7, or in silico libraries for virtual screening of order 10 to the 10, and it's been estimated that there are 10 to the 60 possible molecules out there. And so we're barely scratching the surface. But for generative AI really to become useful in space, we've got to figure out how we can more readily synthesize compounds quickly and cheaply. I think the opportunity that I see is really in the RNA space. And I'll give two-prong. One is I do think we're on the precipice where I think we'll soon be able to generate very meaningful RNA components and RNA therapeutics using generative AI. And second, which we didn't touch upon, I actually think AI is positioned quite well to actually lead us to a major discovery in RNA for getting after novel components with novel functions.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree all the discussion about the barriers, about computing, the data, and technology, right? Even for the chemical synthesis as well. So one barrier or the question or concerns I have for generative AI, even for my field, like Alzheimer's field, I don't know how to ask the right question. For example, in my Alzheimer's drug discovery, right now for me, I study 5 to 10 years. I even don't know which target I should work on for drug discovery, or which key biological question I should work on. So this is something I really hope to figure out in the future, right? It's confused for me. Most exciting for me, generative AI is, I'm pretty exciting for that because for neurodegenerative disease, it's very interesting. Most of the disease associated protein like amyloid, tau, TDP-43, alpha-synuclein, all disorder protein. People try decades to design small molecule target this protein, all failed. It no success, so far. But one exciting right now is like people also mentioned that with baking work or other work, people can design even new protein, novel protein, even this protein not exist, so far, but they can target this kind of disorder proteins for future or potential biological therapy to discover for this challenge disease. I'm pretty exciting that hopefully we have good progress for that as well.
Okay, I would like to thank you for highlighting so many interesting points. I will not do the dumb thing to try and summarize it, but I did hear barriers around data synthesizability of the molecules, about the benchmarks, and about figuring out the right question from the complexity of the biology in order to be able to address that. And with respect to the opportunities, I think we all agree that it seems that there's full agreement that it's AI in this area is a huge opportunity, and I really thank you for highlighting the complexities and the opportunities there, that we need to probe it from many different directions, like global warming, that we don't know exactly how it comes, but not like global warming, it's good that it's coming, I hope. And that highlighting that RNA is a whole new area that has huge opportunities in that. And of course, Alzheimer and the other conditions we had. So I'll stop here and thank you very, very much. Let's all thank our amazing panelists. Thank you.